Mark? Oh. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to begin, so I'll invite you to take your seats. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to everybody who is here in person, and also a special welcome to those who have joined us online. Today we have ESG in action. We're looking forward to hear more about that, but just before we get right into it, a little bit of protocol. I don't think he is here yet. I believe he's stuck in the traffic, but we want to especially welcome the chairman of GraceKennedy Limited, the former holder of the Carlton Alexander Chair in Management, Professor Gordon Shirley. We also welcome Honorable Douglas Orain, who is the former chairman and CEO of GraceKennedy and is always so supportive of everything GK. We have with us Professor Canute Thompson, Pro Vice Chancellor, Undergraduate Studies at the UWI Mona, and he is representing the Vice Chancellor, Sir Hilary Beckles. We have Professor Audrey Henry Lee, Pro Vice Chancellor, Graduate Studies and Research at the UWI Mona. Professor Marvin Reed, Consultant to the Office of the Deputy Vice Principal of the UWI Mona. Professor Dale Weber, former Principal and Pro Vice Chancellor at the UWI Mona, former and also, Chief Supportive Husband, former holder of the James Solomon Senior Chair in Environment, and current director of the Center for Marine Sciences at UWI Mona. Professor Ian Boxill, former deputy principal of the UWI Mona and former holder of the Carlton Alexander Chair in Management. We have Professor Julie Meeks, who is here today in her capacity as a GraceKennedy Foundation director. We have Mr. Philip Alexander, son of the late Honorable Carlton Alexander, and he's also a director of the GraceKennedy Foundation. We have two members of the GraceKennedy Limited Board. We have Gina Phillips-Black, who is also the chairman of our Corporate Governance and Nomination Committee. And we also have Dr. Indiana Minto-Coy, who is the deputy executive director of the Mona School of Business. We have all of our, or most of our GraceKennedy Foundation members. A special shout out to Shaluk Richards, who's the GM of GK General Insurance, and also Deidre Cousins, who is GraceKennedy's Chief Information Officer. I'm almost finished. We also have members of the UWI management team and the wider UWI community. We have our esteemed presenters. We have Professor Lila Rao-Graham, who is the current holder of the Carlton Alexander Chair in Management. And we, of course, have Professor Mona Weber, no stranger to GraceKennedy, who is the current holder of the James Solomon Senior Chair in Environment. Representatives of the media, other special guests, ladies and gentlemen, and certainly not least of all, the students, which is arguably the reason that we do all of this. Welcome to you all. Thank you all very much for braving the uncertain weather and, more importantly, the traffic. It's really my pleasure to welcome you this afternoon. We are highlighting the pioneering work of GraceKennedy, and part of that work is the funding of these professorial chairs at the University of the West Indies. Professor Mona Weber and Professor Lila Rao-Graham, we are so proud of the work that you continue to do. And your work is integral to GraceKennedy's commitment to drive meaningful change, not just for Jamaica land we love, but also across the region and beyond. And we are so proud of the work that you do. So today I'm wearing multiple hats. If you know anything about GraceKennedy, you know that's part of our efficiency thrust. You give one person multiple jobs. If you know, you know. So today I will be your MC, Master of Ceremonies, more of a facilitator. I'm also representing our group CEO, who sends his sincere apologies. He's unavoidably absent. He's sorry to not be here in person. I believe he's watching us online. And then I'm also wearing an environmental social governance hat because I am the chair of GraceKennedy's ESG committee, and I'm very proud of that role. So for those of you who haven't yet looked at our 2024 ESG report, this is a shameless plug. It was published on September 30th. Please take a look, and we look forward to your feedback. But today what we're really going to do when we hear from our esteemed chairs is really to pull it all together when we look at the work that is being done here at the university alongside the work that Grace Kennedy has committed to do and how this supports Grace Kennedy's ESG initiatives. So at Grace Kennedy, I'll just share with you a little bit about and here is our chairman, Professor Gordon Shirley. We welcomed you in your absence, sir. We are very committed to responsible business practices, and we have 5 primary themes under our ESG initiatives, and that is providing responsible products and services, providing a productive and safe, respectful place of work where we're focused on our employees' well-being. We want to ensure that we continue to support vibrant and safe and wholesome communities, and we do that through the work of our GraceKennedy Foundation, which you'll hear more about today, but also our Grace and Staff Community Development Foundation. We are committed to being environmental stewards. You will see the Kingston Harbor Project, which we all know about, and many other initiatives being undertaken by the Grace Kennedy Foundation and throughout the group. And always, we are upholding the highest standards of corporate governance. We are a very humble company. That is very much in our DNA. But we are very proud that our corporate governance framework is award-winning. Right, Mrs. Phillips-Black? Award-winning. So in all that we do, we are always trying to find that balance between profitable enterprise and doing good. And so while we are ensuring that our operations create value for our stakeholders, we want to balance this commitment to profitability with initiatives that ensure that we are contributing positively to the society as well as to the environment. So since 2022, we have really taken some very bold steps to integrate ESG principles into our operations. And so again, you can look at our ESG reports to understand more about that, but I will give you some examples. And we are grateful because this work that we have done has not gone unnoticed. We have received recognition from our industry peers, and we are very proud and grateful for that. So in June of this year, we received the inaugural ESG award at the Jamaica Chamber of Commerce at their annual awards. And then our Grace Food Processors, the manufacturing team, won the JMEA's Manufacturer and Exporters Most Sustainable Manufacturer Award. And so we are very proud of that. These awards are reinforce us and really give us that encouragement to continue doing what we're doing and trying to find a way to align sustainability with social responsibility in everything that we do. And so I promised you some examples. So whether it's implementing solar at our high-low locations or factories, launching our Better For You line, which is a healthier food line, which is coming from demand for consumers, but also our commitment to creating a healthier consumer. Shaluk's Weather Protect product, so that the farmers, when they have been hit by severe weather events, really get an immediate relief to get them back on their feet. GKFG's Money Sense financial literacy program, which is spearheaded by Kemar Ati. Most of you know him as Ding Dong. And he very shrewd businessman and entrepreneur as well as musician, and he really breaks down complex issues for our underserved, underbanked members of our society in areas like pension and responsible budgeting and saving and financial planning to really contribute to financial well-being of our consumers. So we're really proud of these initiatives, which are business initiatives, but are also contributing to our wider ESG framework. So it is really a pleasure to be here today so that you can see how the work of our esteemed chairs ties into what Grace Kennedy is doing through our ESG program on a day-to-day basis. So Professor Lila Rao-Graham was appointed as the Carlton Alexander Chair in Management in January 2023, so she's relatively new in the scheme of things. She is following in the footsteps of Professor Ian Boxill, who resigned as the chair when he was appointed as the deputy principal at the UWI Mona in 2018, and Professor Gordon Shirley, who was the inaugural chair until he was seconded to serve as Jamaica's ambassador to the United States. He, of course, went on to be appointed principal of the UWI Mona when he came back home. And of course, as you don't know, he is chairman of the Grace Kennedy board. He's very special to us. No pressure, Lila. Professor Mona Weber has been the James Solomon Senior Chair in the Environment for the past 8 years. She leads research in critical areas such as marine and coastal preservation, mangrove restoration, and blue carbon. And of course, these efforts align with our ESG goals of reducing our carbon footprint, expanding our recycling program, reducing the use of virgin plastic, all of these initiatives so that we can have less of an impact on the environment as we go through our business operations. I do have to also acknowledge the work of Professor Weber's predecessors, Professor Elizabeth Thomas Hope, who is a world-renowned expert in environmental management, and she retired as chair in 2010. All the best people come from Brownstown. And also Professor Dale Weber, who I don't think is from Brownstown, but he's amazing. Talented coastal ecologist, he served as chair from 2010 to 2015 before passing the baton to his wife, Mona. So maybe her presentation will tell us a little bit about their courtship in the UWI days under the Mona moon, but they are definitely couple goals, right? And before I hand over the mic, I really want to congratulate the GraceKennedy Foundation for pioneering the role in thought leadership, particularly in the areas of education, healthy lifestyles, and the environment. The foundation remains dedicated to fostering a Jamaica that is more resilient and much more inclusive. Through partnerships with educational institutions, initiatives that promote healthier lifestyles, and their environmental stewardship efforts, the GraceKennedy Foundation continues to make a lasting impact across the nation. We're so sorry Caroline can't be here with us today, but we really want to big her up in her absence. The work that she continues to do with her team, Crystal Gale and Marjorie, is just amazing, and it does not go unnoticed. And I must thank our long-standing partners, the University of the West Indies, because you have facilitated this partnership, which we are so proud of, over the many, many years. And if my boss, Don Webby, were here, he couldn't not make mention of the fact that he's a double graduate of the University of the West Indies, and how many of the executive and senior leadership team are graduates of the University of the West Indies. And so I must say that for so many GK team members and for Jamaica and the wider Caribbean, we're so proud to be partnering with this great institution to which we owe a huge debt of gratitude. It is really a world-class institution. So thank you so much for being here. And I would now like to invite Professor Julie Meeks-Gardner, who is a director of the GraceKennedy Foundation, to bring remarks.
Thank you so much, MC Gale, and greetings and salutations to everyone. I am not going to repeat the list of all of the very major people who we have in the room, but welcome to you all. I would just like to acknowledge one of our GraceKennedy Foundation directors, Dr. Carol Gentles, who, like me, along with being a director, is also on the staff of the UWI. Over to you, Carol. So I would also like to continue to extend the regrets on behalf of our chairman, Dr. Fred Kennedy, really hoping that you're able to join us online from Canada, Dr. Fred. Over the past 42 years, the GraceKennedy Foundation and the University of the West Indies, as you have heard, have forged a partnership that has benefited not only Jamaica, but the entire region. And this bond has been demonstrated, we think, most compellingly through these two professorial chairs funded by the foundation, the S. Carlton Alexander Chair in Management and the James S. Solomon Senior Chair in the Environment. and we are here to celebrate their achievements this afternoon. So as a director of the foundation, I'm proud that the GraceKennedy Foundation recognizes the importance of investing in areas that will provide long-term benefit, both for our island and the region. And as you have also heard, the work of the chairs complements GraceKennedy's broader ESG priorities. These are in the areas of environmental stewardship, responsible governance, and social impact, principles that drive the foundation's mission. The foundation championed environmental stewardship long before it was widely embraced. In fact, the chair in environment was established back in 1992. We now have students graduated who were born after 1992. We have presented and published, as the foundation, free annual public lectures that have focused on environment issues by Professor Elizabeth Thomas Hope in 1996, by Professor Michael Taylor in 2015, and another by Professor Mona Weber in 2019. She was the lead lecturer, and that one focused on the Kingston Harbor and served as a springboard for the foundation to prioritize projects aimed at restoring the harbor and its mangroves. Another example, in 2014, we introduced a recycling program within GK's subsidiaries located in the corporate area. And presently, 14 companies are actively separating plastics at source. So I'm not just bigging up the foundation, Chairman, bigging up the entire corporation. We also launched our Earth 365 initiative, which symbolizes GraceKennedy's dedication to sustainable environmental practices every day of the year. In line with our focus on education and healthy lifestyles, the foundation proudly invests in the future of Jamaica by awarding 27 million Jamaican dollars in scholarships each year to tertiary students. And this includes many at UWI. So you students who are online and those of you who are here, you can aim for one of these. I am elated to announce that 2 of the 5 valedictorians at the Mona graduations this year are GKF scholars. Additionally, through our GK Campus Connect Food Bank, we support 300 students attending UWI, UTech, and the Edna Manley College with monthly grocery packages, reducing food insecurity, and helping them to focus on their studies. We also provide assistance to the UWI Mona Girls campus-wide feeding initiatives. So our present chairs, Professor Mona Weber and Professor Lila Rao-Graham, they have both demonstrated passion, energy, and leadership in their respective fields. They have demonstrated a deep understanding of the vulnerabilities faced by the region, and they have been proactive in exploring innovative solutions. Through their leadership, they have successfully fostered partnerships locally, regionally, and internationally in critical economic and societal areas, including the environment and data for development. Professor Mona Weber, she has been chair since 2016. She was recently appointed the head of the Department of Life Sciences, and she continues as the James S. Solomon Senior Chair with an unwavering commitment to environmental sustainability. Professor Weber has also played important roles in the Foundation's other environmental initiatives and serves as a member of our Environmental Committee. Now, I have some notes about some of the achievements that Professor Weber has undertaken, but having discussed it with her, I am actually going to allow her to present these as part of her presentation rather than giving you the details here. I'm just going to link with some of the GraceKennedy Foundation matters. So she has been integrally involved in our latest endeavor, the Kingston Harbor Cleanup Project, which I hope we will hear. No? Okay. So if we're not going to hear about that, I will tell you about it. This collaborative initiative, it was launched in February 2022, and it brings together the GraceKennedy Foundation, the Ocean Cleanup, and Clean Harbors Jamaica to address waste pollution in Kingston Harbor. Everyone will agree, a very worthy cause. By installing waste-trapping barriers at the mouths of gullies, the project seeks to significantly reduce the amount of waste entering the harbor. So, we will hear more. On behalf of the Center for Marine Sciences, Professor Weber negotiated a new mangrove monitoring project with the Ocean Cleanup. We'll hear about that one a little bit. Okay. So that is to monitor the health of the mangroves in the Kingston Harbor and quantify the impact that the interceptor barriers are having on the harbor. So we are all excited to hear about the impact of the project. Since then, the foundation has coordinated 12 beach cleanups, mobilizing over 3,800 volunteers as part of our outreach efforts to promote environmental awareness and sustainability. And the project itself has prevented over 2.5 million kilograms of waste from entering the harbor. So the waste is intercepted at the gully mouth and cleaned up. Just this last week, the project installed its 8th barrier at the largest gully on the island, Sandy Gully. So we're looking forward to hearing much more from Professor Weber in her presentation. Professor Lila Rao-Graham, she joined us last year. She brings her expertise in strategic business intelligence, data for development, and knowledge management. And I'm particularly excited to mention that she's currently working on a data visualization tool for the GraceKennedy Foundation. This is to help us better monitor and report on the impact of our programs because we'll be able to visualize the data. She also facilitated Applied Generative AI workshop attended by graduate students, targeted stakeholders, and GraceKennedy staff. Are we going to hear about that? Okay. And she has led a series of AI seminars, one of which engaged local business community, including senior members of the GraceKennedy Group, on transforming business value through generative AI. Very powerful tools. Through these efforts, Professor Rao-Graham is fostering knowledge exchange and innovation, benefiting both GraceKennedy's operations and the wider business community. So we really look forward to hearing more about her research and her achievements this afternoon. Looking ahead, I'm confident that the alignment between the work of the chairs and GraceKennedy's ESG initiatives will continue to grow. The foundation remains dedicated to creating synergies that benefit Jamaica and the wider Caribbean. The board of the GraceKennedy Foundation is committed to supporting the continued success of these chairs, knowing that their contributions will contribute meaningfully to the sustainable development of our region. Congratulations once again to both Professor Weber and Professor Rao-Graham on your exceptional achievements. We are excited to witness the impact of your work as you continue to lead in your success, your respective fields. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Professor Meeks Gardner, for sharing with us a little bit more about the work of the GraceKennedy Foundation, which is inspiring, and also giving us a little sneak peek into the presentations from our professorial chairs who, you know, present all the time, but just don't seem very excited about presenting to us today. I don't know. I sense some trepidation. I don't know what's happening, even though this is such an amazing and welcoming audience. Now we are going to invite Professor Canute Thompson, who is going to speak to us a little bit. He is the Pro Vice Chancellor of Undergraduate Studies at the University of the West Indies. Well, please welcome him.
Good afternoon. Like Professor Julie Meeks Gardner, I won't attempt to remember the vast number of wonderful people who should be recognized, but let me say in the traditional language, I acknowledge the protocol and I affirm it. I wish, however, to make special mention of and celebrate the presence of your chair, former principal of the Mona campus, and one of my mentors. Also, former principal, my good friend from Manchester, not Brownstown, Professor Dale Weber. Okay, thank you. And to all my good friends in the audience. This is a celebratory mood and evening, and I wish to commend the GraceKennedy Foundation on behalf of the University of the West Indies, your partner, for the work you have been doing in defense of our environment, and doing so through social partnerships and under the principles of good governance. The climate crisis is probably our worst enemy and our greatest challenge. Sitting beside it, of course, are other crises, such as conflicts in various regions of the world, as well as starvation. But there's a sense in which the issues of the environment and the climate crisis that it triggers is the most ubiquitous of all the challenges we face. We're not indifferent to hunger and starvation in Africa and elsewhere, or the conflicts in the Middle East. We're part of one common thread of humanity, but the impact that they have on us are not the same as that of the crisis of the climate. We can't solve all the challenges of the climate, whether it is in the deep south or the far north. But we must do what we can in the areas that we find ourselves, the spaces that we occupy, and the areas from which we draw our living. And perhaps it is against that background that the mantra, think global, act local, remains as relevant today as when it was first promulgated over 40 years ago. It is perhaps a trite observation, but nonetheless a necessary reminder that we note that the efforts at addressing the climate crisis require, as the GraceKennedy Foundation has demonstrated, require partnerships and require systematic governance principles. The GK Foundation, UWI Chairs in Environment and Management, represent a lasting partnership not only of thinking globally and acting locally, but of strengthening the systems of effective local action. And I wish to commend Professors Weber and Rao-Graham for the work that they have been doing, about which we'll hear later this evening. The UWI's engagement with issues of the climate, climate, with issues of partnerships and governance is, however, much broader, and happily so, than this important partnership we share. And I wish to share with you very quickly some of the work that the UWI has been doing in the area of sustainable development. Earlier this year, the Times Higher Education Performance Table, the impact rankings, focused on the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals in building in academic reputation and global research, in building its academic reputation and global research, and achieved a perfect score. Over the past decade, the university has strategically established joint global centers, and we could call that joint global partnerships and initiatives with other respected universities to provide advocacy and development outcomes around sustainable development. Impressively, within the Times Higher Education series of metrics used to evaluate the performance of the individual SDGs, the UWI earned a perfect score of 100 for its relationships to support the goals in pursuit of SDG 17 SDG 17, Partnership for the Goals. The impact rankings identify and celebrate universities that excel in advancing multiple SDGs and evaluating the research, stewardship, outreach, and teaching. The UWI also earned notably high scores in collaborations and health services in assessing SDG 3, good health and well-being, for its proportion of women receiving degrees, in assessing SDG 5, gender equality. It is also instructive to note that the UWI continues to be ranked among the top 5% of universities globally for the overall quality of its research across several areas. So this evening, as we celebrate the partnership between G2K, sorry, if there's an apology I must make, I apologize, between the GraceKennedy Foundation and the UWI, we recognize that the ongoing business of protecting the environment require long-term commitment, to which the university, now in its 76th year, is a stable and ready partner. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Thompson. Did you all know that apart from Professor Thompson's day job as Pro-Vice Chancellor, he's also a certified leadership coach, and he's very widely published. I believe he's at book number 10. I was going to say 9. You see, my research was a bit outdated. But Professor, thank you so much for that. And I think that you really, you spoke to the long-standing partnership between GraceKennedy, the GraceKennedy Foundation, and the University of the West Indies, and also our commitment. I think you perfectly summed it up in speaking about our joint commitment to think globally but act locally, and that really is the epitome of why we're all here this afternoon. So thank you so much for bringing those greetings and sharing with us. And I discovered a new connection between GraceKennedy and the University of the West Indies, and that lies in SDG 5, gender equality, because while you are producing female graduates, GraceKennedy is hiring them, because we have more females in leadership at GraceKennedy than males. So we are aligned in many ways. And now we move on to the main event. We are going to welcome Professor Lila Rao-Graham, who is going to come and share with us her insights on the use of data to drive development strategies, enhance decision-making, and foster transparency, all things that are very important to us, both at the university and also at GraceKennedy. And so we're really looking forward to hearing and learning more about how this partnership has really fueled some of GraceKennedy's decision-making over time. So please join me in welcoming Professor Rao-Graham.
Well, thank you all for coming, first of all. The lack of enthusiasm is because of the kind words and the increased pressure from those words. So you've set the expectations very high, so hopefully I'll deliver. So today, this afternoon, I'm going to discuss some of the work that we've been doing around data for development. And more specifically, I'm going to focus on the importance of public-private partnerships. The UN Secretary General has called for a data revolution as a part of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. But to achieve this, we have to recognize data as an economic asset. Data has some interesting characteristics. One of the few resources that's characterized by abundance rather than scarcity. Its multiple users accessing it at the same time does not depreciate its value, and it's non-depletable. It can be used and reused to generate benefits across sectors. So there's a great deal of opportunity and economic value to be derived from recognizing data as a valuable, reusable economic asset. In terms of its potential, there's several trends such as open data, big data, and digitization that has significant commercial potential. The estimates are in the trillions. And interestingly also for our region, it's transforming major sectors of the economy. So data sits at the heart of a global movement. The practice of openly publishing and sharing key data sets for others to analyze and reuse using new technologies out there has a great potential to generate social and economic impact all over the world. However, we must point out that the data by itself is not enough. There are some key actors that are central to the processing and analysis of this data to provide insights and innovations that will lead to sustainable development. And while its use has great potential, we also have to recognize the possibility of misuse. And we have to ensure the proper governance is in place to recognize that. I also want to point out in this diagram that there's a lot of potential for the reuse of data across actors. So there's a lot of possibilities to get value from data by actors that weren't originally the ones collecting it. And so we have to look at the possibilities of partnerships to do that effectively. But to look at the data for development, we first have to start looking for the opportunities. We first have to recognize where we are. And we're a part of a global data barometer research team. The Global Data Barometer is a lead development indicator that provides insights into where and how data is being used to shape a more inclusive response to development challenges. In a sense, it gives a feel of the health of your data ecosystem that's seen as important for the realization of the Sustainable Development Goals. As GD points out, data is a source of power. It can be exploited for private gain, or it can be deployed and governed for the public good. So as a part of our research activities, we are the coordinator for the Caribbean Hub. The first edition included 109 countries around the world, 8 of which were Caribbean countries. Extensive data collection was done, and this data is openly available and free to reuse. Also, there's a tool available that allows you to explore these data sets. And so we're always looking for opportunity to reuse that data. We're currently in progress of the second edition as we speak. So, as I said, one of the key actors is the government. Not only is the government responsible or needed to support the data governance policies and frameworks, but they too have open government data sets that have potential to transform every sector of our economy. Data sharing can generate significant social and economic benefits, and many countries across the world are creating open data portals to promote open production and consumption. So we wanted to understand, given these opportunities, why more governments in Jamaica, in the region, weren't looking at embracing these opportunities. what we found was that the investment in these open government data initiatives are not currently seen as a priority. And some of the reasons for this is that the existing use cases for demonstrating value opportunities are not necessarily relevant for our region. And so we have explored data value opportunities for the Caribbean using sectors that are critical to our region. More specifically, we've focused on tourism and agriculture. And that work has been presented quite recently at an international conference. Obviously, one of the government entities that's critical in this is the National Statistics Office. SDG monitoring with 17 SDGs, 169 targets, and 232 unique indicators can be a burden on our NSO in our region. So we wanted to explore how the region can monitor SDG progress more effectively. And we have two recommendations, which is to look at a regional approach to accelerating SDGs and to look at the use of alternate data sources, big data, private sector data, can be used to monitor this progress. So in terms of the regional approach, obviously Caribbean countries have characteristics in common that may impact their progress of the SDGs. Obviously issues of size, scale, and resources. So we are suggesting that the Caribbean approach will facilitate the identification of common challenges and the development of targeted strategies for achieving SDGs. However, to do this effectively and to identify the opportunities for collaboration, we have to understand where each country is and where the region as a whole is. So again, we've done some work looking at the state of SDG progress in the Caribbean region. We've built some data visualization tools that can be used to look at the state of the region, and this work has been published in an international journal. As I said also, the other opportunity is the use of non-traditional data sources for SDG monitoring. For example, is electricity use an indicator for poverty. And so there's opportunities for using non-traditional data sources. As you see in the diagram, it's maybe hard to see, but the traditional sources are those sources coming from the NSOs, the National Statistical Offices. And so there are opportunities using private sector data, commercial data, mobile phone records, financial data, and also social media data, which is considered to be citizen-generated data. So we have done some work in looking at the opportunities of using social media data, which is considered big data, to understand public sentiment. Analyzing public sentiments can be used to guide public policies and communications. Typically, this is done using knowledge, attitude, and perception studies, which can be quite expensive to administer. And social media has become an important avenue for expressing public sentiments. So we've done some research to understand citizens' views on the COVID-19 pandemic restrictions imposed by the Jamaican government using sentiment analysis, which is a data mining technique, and we have done that on what was then Twitter feed. And this work has been presented and is now under consideration for the Pan American Journal of Public Health. So this gives you an idea of what sentimental analysis is about. You can take the tweets and you classify them as positive and negative, and then you can organize them around particular themes. What are people talking about? What are they concerned about? Travel, commerce, as it pertains to being locked down during COVID. Hopefully the tweets are not offensive. There are quite a few that we had to take out. We included them, but we won't present them. Okay, so the second important actor is the private sector. And the private sector is an important source of non-traditional data and big data sets. So we wanted to look at the opportunities for partnerships with the private sector to help us monitor these SDGs. But first we had to get a feel of whether the private sector is willing to partake in these partnerships. So we conducted a survey to look at the attitudes to sharing data for official statistics, and also to identify the sources within organizations that could be used for monitoring SDGs. And then also we asked about their internal analytics capabilities. And from that, we recognized that there was an interest. Private sector is willing to share data for official purposes, such as official statistics and SDG monitoring. They also identified that they have some issues around analytic skills, so they saw an opportunity for academia and private sector partnerships to build those skills. And again, that work is available online. I think we have spoken a little bit previously, but private sectors are actually contributing to the data agenda. They may not be intentionally setting out to do so, but there are a lot of actions or activities they're doing that do contribute to the data agenda. And, but much of the connection with fulfilling SDGs is anecdotal. So we wanted to study or identify private sector data-related contributions to SDGs regionally. So we mapped private sector contributions to data actions for sustainable development across the region. We had found 17 cases. A lot of the actions are coming through the foundations. And from that, we analyzed a specific case study involving private sector and international partners. By analyzing that case study, we were able to identify critical success factors for engaging private sector actors in development initiatives. And that work we've done is available online. The links have been provided. If you're interested, I will follow up with that. But I just want to stop here, point out here that one of the most important issues for use and reuse of data is building capacity, data capacity. And we cannot just build capacity within private sector, but we have to build data capacity across all sectors. So it's said that a well-functioning integrated national data system requires robust data literacy with data institutions, government ministries, the private sector, and the general population. So we have to do some work in building the capacity, data capacity for all citizens. We have done some work in building capacity for marginalized marginalized groups. In countries marked by high unemployment and gender equality, online education can change lives. We've talked about gender inequality, the difficulty of women with children getting to locations to do education. So online education is critical in that way, but traditional platforms for online learning are not suited necessarily to a developing context. For example, it requires internet access. And so we've done some work. We've developed an architecture specifically for blended learning in resource-constrained environments. And we've created a prototype which was deployed in Haiti with some success. And that work has also been published in an international journal. So obviously, we can't talk about this without talking about the new kid on the block, AI. And we all know that AI, the tools are dependent on the quality of the data, and we have to be careful of the bias in the data. So we've done some work around responsible use of AI. We're a part of an international research team, the Global Index on Responsible AI. We call it GIRA. And this provides a comparative benchmark for assessing progress towards AI globally. It involves 138 countries, 9 of which were Caribbean countries, and we led the Caribbean hub. The results of this can help governments improve their strategies to ensure responsible use of AI. And again, those data sets that have been collected are open, freely available, and the online tool to explore the data sets is also available. And we recently launched the results of the Caribbean region at an AI conference in Antigua. You may not see it, but those are the scores, which of 138 countries, you can see we're lagging in the responsible use of AI. We've also, I think, Prof. Meeks mentioned this, done some capacity building. We have hosted a generative AI workshop for about 20 participants, hands-on, and that included students and private sector and academia. We also had 2 AI seminars that was led by one of our partners, a professor from San Francisco State University, and one again was focused on academia and one on the private sector. Currently, we're looking at opportunities of the development of an AI-driven social monitor, and hopefully next time we meet, I'll be able to provide more details on that. But that's what we're currently doing. So I know the theme here is about ESGs, and I've been talking a lot about SDGs. I told them I'm not an expert in ESGs, but I found it quite interesting because obviously it's becoming a must-do in many companies, and I've recognized that it's very data-intensive, and it requires a lot of expertise and is data-driven. And that's, I think, going to be a problem for, I'm going to say many organizations, but it is going to be a burden for some to be able to do this effectively. But I find it very interesting, and I'm excited about it because I think one of the issues is that there's a lack of connection between what sometimes the private sector is doing and SDG monitoring. So I think it's going to be interesting to see how the ESG reporting can lead into SDG reporting. I think that's an important connection that would be useful. So again, I see the opportunities for partnerships here. We as academia can help companies that don't have the resources to do the ESG monitoring effectively, and obviously the ESG and SDG alignment can be considered. This is a diagram that shows the alignment between SDGs and ESGs, and why I like it most because at the center is SDG 17 that I think we spoke about, which is partnerships for the achievement of SDGs. And this quote that I like is, when government agencies, civil society, academia, and private sector securely take part in a national data system, the potential uses of data expand, and so does the potential impact on development. So in closing, I haven't even looked at my time, but the opportunities for partnerships are many. The open government data sets will help private sector in their decision making. We have a lot now of citizen-generated data out there. We have to look at the opportunities for private sector data to be used as proxies for SDG indicators. And importantly, I think now is the time to see the alignment between the ESGs and the SDGs. We also want to see the partnerships for shared expertise. Of course, the demands for data analytics and data-driven decision-making are increasing, so academia can play an important role here. Professor Mansing is here, expert in the area, so we have that expertise in-house. And in terms of some critical success factors, the most important is capacity building at all levels. And so we have to build that awareness, that change in mindset, that we need to see data as an asset. It's more valuable than many of your assets in your organizations. We want to, again, promote broad-based data literacy, which looks at SDG 4, education, and of course, we have to build our own specialists, our data scientists. And the Department of Computing is here, so they can partner also. And so, in closing, I just want to point out that this work is not mine alone. It is a collaboration, a partnership, my research partners. So on most of these activities, Dr. Mike Norton, Dr. Russell, Dr. Mike Norton is traveling, and Professor Verma from the San Francisco State University. Much of my previous work has been done with partnering with Prof. Mansing. We've done many research activities around data and strategic decision making. So, and finally, of course, I have to thank the GraceKennedy Foundation. They have obviously taken on board the importance of partnerships and led this through the the partnership with UWI and the foundation, and the support for the research that has been done here. Thank you so much.
Professor Rao-Graham, that was amazing. Thank you so much for sharing and managing to put so much information into, well, one easily digestible presentation, very easily digestible, thank you. But also you made it quite concise too, so thank you so much for that. All of what you shared was very interesting and enlightening, but I'm particularly excited around your proposed work and the partnerships, and you said partnerships so many times, and those really are critical. If we are hoping to tackle the global and social issues that are plaguing us, then there have to be partnerships between academia, civil society, governments, and of course the private sector, and GraceKennedy is committed to playing our part in that. But you mentioned in particular the focus on the tracking of the SDGs, and I've mentioned GraceKennedy's ESG We Care report a couple of times, but if you look at that report, you will see that our goals and targets are aligned with several of the United Nations SDGs. And one of the challenges that we have had at GraceKennedy, and we are a company with significant resources, is in fact gathering that data, making sure it's accurate, and doing that tracking and reporting that we have committed to doing. And so whenever I'm in a forum speaking about ESG, because GraceKennedy is kind of at the forefront of this initiative regionally, there are smaller companies and other big companies who are interested in doing this kind of work, which we all know the benefits of, the wider benefits of, but they are challenged by that data gathering, that reporting. And so I really think that there is an incredible opportunity for the university to look at how you can produce something that would be used by the private sector on a wide scale across the region. So, and would be part of promoting the wider SDG and ESG framework. So thank you so much for that. And up next, so can we give Professor Rao-Graham another round of applause? That was a really excellent presentation. And now we want to welcome Professor Mona Weber, who will be, of course, you've heard several times that she holds the James Solomon Senior Chair in the Environment, which she has held for quite a few years, since 2016, I think. And she's no stranger to GraceKennedy, and she is going to come and share with us her very important work around the environment, and particularly in the area of marine development. So we are looking forward to hearing from her. Please join me in welcoming Professor Weber.
Okay, good afternoon. Thank you very much for coming. And all protocols observed. We're well on in the afternoon. I will start by telling you what I'm not going to talk about. Because I think this is probably one of the first times I will speak at a GraceKennedy Foundation, GraceKennedy function, without talking about plastics and Kingston Harbor pollution. And it's because the movement has evolved. The GraceKennedy Foundation and Caroline Mahfood has been playing a tremendous role in dealing with the real issue of stopping the plastics from coming into the harbor. And so we now are focused more on monitoring the change. And we're negotiating a project to do that in the mangroves, but it's not quite signed yet. So maybe next time we'll talk more about how we are able to demonstrate how the tremendous work being done by Caroline and her team is paying off in terms of the mangroves and the rest of the harbor. So, make sure I get this right. Let's try again. Okay, so what? Right. What I do want to talk about is the work that has been happening with respect to environment, of course, but I want to contextualize this in what the university's framework is, or strategic plan, very quickly, and then talk about the graduate research and other projects that we've been involved in. How we've helped with our staff and students in terms of development, and a little bit, like Lila, on the Sustainable Development Goals and the ESGs. And the UWI strategic framework, or strategic 5-year strategic plan, is the foundation on which our work and our activities rest. And I will highlight in particular our research and student development, or grants that relate to the research, and of course outreach, and a critical thing, staff development. Our staff is our greatest asset. And the students who are here, who I will be mentioning, of my 9 graduate students right now, 7 of them have been helped with the James S. Basalmon Senior Funds, and 4 of them, their project is wholly funded. The research is funded by the GraceKennedy funds. And so I'll talk about Jonathan's work with fish aggregating devices. I'll talk about seagrasses and mangroves and their blue carbon value. And then 2 other projects that indicate partnerships with overseas colleagues. So Jonathan's work, and Jonathan is here, you can harass him after, on the moored fish aggregating devices. And this is the first time in Jamaica where we are able to not just put these devices into the sea, but actually monitor them properly. And these devices work off the principle that fish will aggregate around any floating object. Thanks, Chantel, for this picture. But a mooring rope or floating seaweed like sargassum will attract fish. And the value of these devices is you can have commercial fishing supported, research, of course, into the biodiversity of the area, and recreation, and there is environmental value. Our reefs are overfished, we know that very well, and this has the potential to reduce fishing pressure on the reefs. Can this work in Jamaica? Well, we decided to find out, and this, I felt dragged into this project. I'm not into fisheries, but I have a student who is extremely passionate about fisheries and fishing. And so he built his own fish aggregating devices, the flotation and the attraction section. They were deployed at 2 sites in the Port Royal protected area, Port Royal Keys, and also in Black River. The devices are monitored in water for the species of fish and the biomass, and if there is seasonal change in these 2 contrasting areas, because it's extremely important to gather data on how they are performing. And they work even when the attracting sections are collapsed and fish are still attracted to the devices. Jonathan is a fisherman, and so he also does trolling. And experimental trolling is how we would see how the devices would actually be used by fishers. And he has been able to land quite large pelagic species using that have come to use these devices. So we hope to have these more available. There's a project now on at Fisheries to put these devices out into the water, and we're hoping we will help them to monitor them. But it's very important to introduce these. They will take the pressure off our overfished coral reefs. And his data will help show the efficacy of these systems. The other project I want to highlight by Hugh Small, who's doing his PhD and also in the room, is with seagrasses. And seagrasses and mangroves are tremendously important marine systems for their ecosystem services. We have been having a plethora of overwater structures at hotels. And Hugh was funded by Sandals to see how the shading from these bungalows would affect the seagrasses. And you can see that picture is a little unclear, but it shows the shading under a bungalow compared to just outside. Quite significant shading. Seagrasses react very quickly, very negatively to shading, and along with the loss of the seagrass and the loss of the nursery function and biodiversity loss, you, of course, have erosion. And these structures, these are pictures from Hugh. You can see the base of the bungalow column is being eroded. And so there needs to be a solution. There needs to be a way to fix this. And I mean, Hugh has various ideas, maybe artificial lighting, maybe just making them higher so lighting is available to the sea bottom. But he also needed to conduct some experiments to see the critical light levels, because he was contracted fairly early in the development. By the time he got to the site to start sampling, seagrasses had pretty much gone because the bungalows had been established. And so we now have to do experiments to see the critical light levels for the seagrasses and how the seagrasses respond, because there are physiological responses as well. Along with this work, we got the opportunity through partnerships with colleagues at FIU and other universities in the Caribbean to highlight the value of our seagrasses as carbon sequestration systems. We all know about mangroves and carbon sequestration. Seagrasses are extremely important as well. And so a group formed in the Caribbean at over 30 countries to look at the amount of carbon associated with our seagrass beds. And Jamaica was one of the countries. They tooled us with the necessary equipment, and we sampled seagrass blue carbon and provided those data to the group. There is a publication that is being generated, and we hope to be part of that. The sampling was done at 3 sites, 2 in Port Royal and 1 in Discovery Bay. And the work is really showing that our Caribbean seagrasses have quite a bit of carbon, higher than the global average. And despite this, this is relatively unknown. This is new work. So it is showing that the carbon density is very important, to know for these systems. And the carbon stocks, the seagrasses are at risk. And so knowing the carbon stocks and knowing the threat of adding this carbon back to the atmosphere if the seagrasses are lost, it's very important. So the Caribbean is a global hotspot for seagrass organic carbon. And this is just being unearthed for the first time. Mangroves, which I know I'm expected to speak about. This now is the work of another graduate student, Patrice Francis. And along with looking at mangrove distribution and mangrove loss, mangrove rehabilitation, we want to also show mangrove value as carbon-rich systems. And we are talking a lot about blue carbon, but it can't be overstated, because the systems like estuarine mangroves and oceanic mangroves, they produce a lot of carbon. They remove a lot of carbon from the atmosphere and keep it buried for very, very long periods. And so we're interested in both the mass of the forests, the above-ground biomass, as well as the below-ground biomass. And we know a lot about the forest area and the growth of the trees, but we know relatively little about the biomass below the forest. And so Patrice is sampling above ground biomass. We have a team in the forest. But through the Grace Kennedy funds, we were able to purchase a device called a Russian Cora. And it is one of the recommended devices by the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. The IPCC methods indicate that we use a device like this that can penetrate as much as a meter into the sediment below the forest and also extract an intact core of mangrove sediment. This can then be sectioned, and it can tell us the different quality and quantity of carbon that is stored below the forest at different levels. Related to this, we were approached by Pew Development Trust, and they funded us to the tune of $230,000 US, just over, to expand this information and to look at, in particular, the range of carbon quantities across Jamaica's forests. And so we applied these protocols and methods, and we sampled mangrove areas of different types so we could be representative and in different states of regeneration. And this is important because we have been removing mangroves and replacing them, restoring mangroves, and really creating relatively new forest areas. How long will it take these forest areas to build back that carbon that was stored beneath the original forest? We really are not able to replace what we've lost. It will take centuries to do that. And so there are many carbon-rich areas that really need to be ring-fenced. They really should not be removed, and all our restoration activities will not put back the real value of the forest. And so the work that we do, we hope, will be included in Jamaica's nationally determined contributions. We focus a lot on reducing emissions, on using alternative energy. For the first time, we would like to have these blue carbon systems included in Jamaica's NDCs. And we think we're well on the way to having that done. The other two projects I want to mention, excuse me, I just need a little more. The other two projects I want to mention are not student-related. There is a project, again, with partnership with colleagues in Florida, where we want to focus on rehabilitation of the queen conch. The queen conch is a significant Jamaican fishery. It's a threatened species, and so it is a very managed fishery. The conch also are important grazers on seagrass beds, and that's not negative, because in grazing the seagrass beds, they actually keep them more healthy and more productive. And so the queen conch has been in decline because they are overfished. These are sedentary mollusks that are very easy to catch. And so they're very quickly removed in large numbers from the seafloor. So much so the problem that we had to close our fishery in 2019. And that made us quite panicked in terms of the sustainability of our queen conch stocks. And so the university was approached to look at what we could do, how we could improve the research to sustain our conch stocks. we were funded by NEPA initially. We received seed funds from NEPA to look at the Discovery Bay stocks, to look at their abundance and spawning activity. And we were able to show how these organisms were reproducing or not. The queen conch spawn according to temperature. And so with increased temperatures of the ocean, we wanted to see if their spawning season had changed, because they have to be protected during their spawning season. And so we were able to monitor the temperature and the spawning activity. The lower picture is a queen conch egg mass that contains 500,000 eggs. They were able to spawn in our conch pens, and we were able to have some measured success. However, there was a lot of poaching, and that research had to be paused. Quite fortuitously, however, our partners at Harbour Branch offered to gift the UWI a queen conch laboratory. This is about a 20-foot container that is equipped to hold queen conch eggs, allow them to hatch, the feeding of the larvae and the juvenile stages, all done within the queen conch lab. It's a mobile laboratory because we are to be able to, once the technology is developed, we are to be able to transport this structure to the other fish sanctuaries so that we can carry out the same activity across Jamaica. So a small portion of the queen conch egg mass is allowed to fertilize. It's pre-fertilized, allowed to hatch in the lab, early larval stage and late larval stage where it then settles. All of that takes about 3 months. And in about 8 months, we should be able to return juvenile conch to the seagrass beds. The laboratory has the capacity for 1,500 juveniles from only a third of an egg mass. And the survival of queen conch naturally is very poor. From one egg mass, you have one adult queen conch surviving. So we hope to increase that several folds through the activities. All through this process, there are workshops and interactions with the other sanctuaries so that the knowledge can be passed on. And it's been a tremendous project. The Discovery Bay team manages this project. The construction and shipping of the lab was funded solely by Harbour Branch and their partners, Jamaica Conch Restoration. Other groups, NEPA I mentioned, the National Fisheries Authority, the Jamaica Conservation Partners through their FACE Foundation, and U.S. Embassy, and of course, James and Salmon funds. And so it's a tremendous effort that involves quite a lot of partners. The last project I want to mention is with sargassum. And I know there has been a lot of talk about sargassum and its use, and the university has been conducting research in this regard. And one of these involved using sargassum, as we think Jamaican farmers might try to do, and we here have been trying to do, using sargassum as mulch or as compost, using it on their crops. And it's brown alga. It's very useful as fertilizer, but we wanted to see if it could be just collected and used by farmers safely, or if there were issues with this. And we also wanted to see if it had to be washed free of salt, or it could be, again, used unprocessed. And so the project was undertaken primarily by Daniel Hay, a student, and partners at the University of York. Now, we had a huge sargassum project that started in 2023, and it was called the SAR-Track project, funded by several partners, and this was the UWI's part of the SAR-Track. Most of the experiment was done in the botany greenhouse, botany gardens, and it was positive. The sargassum, unwashed sargassum, had poor outcomes, but the washed sargassum, especially the compost, proved to be a good fertilizer. Unfortunately, sargassum naturally has high inorganic arsenic, and it sequesters other heavy metals from the environment. And so everything we do, we wanted to test for at least arsenic, among other elements. And this is showing the fruits and the leaves and the roots of the various plants, whether it's rinsed or unrinsed. And the arsenic levels in the roots of the unrinsed Scotch bonnet pepper, both when you use it in compost form and in mulch form, was unacceptably high. And so we've been discussing with partners ways of reducing the arsenic. That's the next project I'm interested in doing. I also thought it would be good to hear about biomethane potential, because there's a lot in the news also about sargassum, running sargassum on cars, cars on sargassum. It's not as easy as it sounds. But the biomethane potential of sargassum is high. And we did some experiments as part of this project with the Scientific Research Council, their system, and the results were very positive. We used different treatments from 0 to 100% sargassum, and burnable gas was produced. The sargassum-only gas did not ignite, but all other treatments were fine, with the 60% treatment being the best. And so this has potential. The team from the Scientific Research Council has worked out the amount of sargassum you would need and the amount of burnable gas it would produce, and the scale of the system that could produce gas for a household or a community or so on. That is what they do. As usual, I was curious about the arsenic because in a lot of Jamaican communities where biogas is used, they put the biodigester sludge on the soil. It's used as a soil ameliorant. And so I wanted to know how much arsenic there was in the sargassum biogas sludge, and it's too much. The arsenic levels, of course, in the 100% sargassum, that's over 100 ppm. But even at 50% sargassum, it's unacceptable. So the next year, when I present, I hope to tell you about a project that will reduce the arsenic in sargassum so it's safe for use. And with all of this and other information from across the region, I thought it very important for persons to know what they should or shouldn't do with sargassum. Tremendously potential raw material that is free, being delivered on our shores, whether we like it or not. But we have to be careful how we use it. I wanted to put this up because it shows how partnership can generate quite a bit of publication, but it also is about communicating our research. Over the 2 years, of the sargassum project, we had 8 publications, and there are 2 reports that we're currently trying to get in journals. The opportunity to communicate also comes through workshops. The Queen Conch workshop conducted in association with that project, and workshops across the labs about how to tackle the various problems. We host persons from other universities for these workshops, and I had the tremendous opportunity of being part of a Cornell plastics and mangrove course where I was able to present on microplastics and plastics in the mangroves. So the opportunities to communicate and for outreach are tremendous, and sometimes they come to you. Journalists from overseas have approached us to talk about the mangroves and the plastics and how we're dealing with these issues in Jamaica. In fact, the work being done by Mrs. Mafood and her team is becoming quite famous. The international community is interested in what we're doing in Jamaica in this regard. And so we have to take these opportunities to show what one small country can do in the environment and in other areas. This now deals with staff development and student development and opportunities to support growth, because these young people are the future. And so 2 of our staff and graduate students and others were supported to attend conferences through the James Salmon Funds. Very importantly, the idea is not just to present your work at these conferences, but to become a part of the society. And so both Dr. Trench and Mr. Small, who is here, are now pretty much members of the international society that relates to their work. And this will provide mentorship, this will provide access to resources and to publishing that will help propel their careers. Student development, I'm very proud of the internships that we've been able to support. Sometimes our hosts are not able to provide stipends, and the James Salmon Fund has been very useful in that regard. But I'm very proud of the partners. The Environmental Foundation of Jamaica is a constant partner. The labs, of course, and the Scientific Research Council, that gives you the number of interns that they host, and that they hosted, sorry. And these all help us prepare our students for the next step. I was able to use funds to assist in honoring our honor students, in recognizing them. And this too is part of the whole staff student development and motivation to excel. And so this brings me to my 1 slide, or maybe 2 slides, on the ESGs. New to me as well, but clearly our work in the environment and in helping persons in their own development is a critical part of social and governance aspects of the ESGs. The SDGs, the GraceKennedy Chairs were on the same page. The SDGs also align, and we have been demonstrating our work and our alignment and our ability to enhance SDG 4, SDG 13, 14, and 17. And 17 is a recurring part of what we do. And so these intersecting frameworks, my diagram is different, but the point is the same. These frameworks all allow us to ensure that there is environmental sustainability, social cohesion, and good governance, because without that, what we do is just not sustainable. And so I thank you, and I thank the tremendous team of the Center for Marine Sciences, Discovery Bay Marine Lab, the Port Royal Marine Lab, and the Department of Life Sciences. And believe me, they are extremely thankful to the GraceKennedy Foundation and the funds that we are able to use to help us do what we do in the environment and in promoting development. I thank you.
Professor Weber, it's always a pleasure for me to be in the audience when you are presenting. The presentation was rich with information, but we're indebted to you for all of the work that you do in preserving Jamaica's natural resources. And importantly, your commitment to assisting us in climate resilience, which is so important for everyone across the globe, but I think of even more critical importance to Jamaica as a Caribbean nation and our neighbors who are small island states, and therefore just so much more at risk. So thank you so much for this work, and also the level of innovation that goes into the work as well, the floating fishery habitats and the use of sargassum as fuel and fertilizer, something that was really very interesting to me as I sat there listening to you. So thank you so much. And I have to say that when I am able to enjoy these presentations, it really reminds me why I'm so proud to work at GraceKennedy, because our commitment to so much more than what we do operationally and our commitment to so much more than operating efficient businesses really speaks volumes. And it's in forums like these that you really are reminded of what makes GraceKennedy who we are and why we are 102 years old. So thank you all so much. So we will now open the floor for questions. We will check if there are any questions, because we do have persons joining us online. So we'll check if there are any questions online. And if you have any questions, members of the audience, please just raise your hand for any of our presenters. Yes, and a mic will be brought to you.
Hi,
and if you
good
could
day.
introduce yourself and before you ask your question, please. Thank you.
Sure. So I'm the Marvin Reed, and my question is for Professor Graham. So as we know, it's a noble thought to have these collaborations on data between private sectors and the public sector and so on. And in one of your slides, you mentioned the sort of hesitancy or the reluctance of government to actively be involved. And so the specific point I wish to make is, in the work you have, do you have any case studies that says, if you do this, this is the monetary value?
Yes, so thanks. Is this on? Yeah. Okay. Thanks for that. So one of the projects or the research activities that we had looked at was looking at the value of these opportunities, and that was the one that we looked at to look at the agriculture and tourism sector. How can data help them? In a lot of times, a lot of money is spent for the tourism sector in importing produce for the hotels. And so what we have pointed out is, if we identify data linkages between the agricultural sector and the tourism sector, we can fill that gap of what is spent on importing goods for the tourism sector. So in that way, I wouldn't say we could give actual value, but we could show the opportunity of the gap we were filling in terms of monetary amount. So that level of importation has a value, and we could estimate how we could provide innovations to reduce that amount.
Thank you so much for that question and response. We have another question over there, and while the mic is traveling, we just want to welcome Catherine Kennedy, who joined a little bit late. I think she was stuck in traffic. She too is a GraceKennedy Foundation director.
Okay, good afternoon. This question is for Professor Lila Rao-Graham. My name is Justin Mitchell. Okay, so at face value, using AI to process data regarding to public and private sector contributions to sustainable development feels counterintuitive. I was curious, is the magnitude and purpose of this work proportional to the output of this AI usage, and how else is that being remedied? Should I repeat?
Yes, please.
Okay.
Sorry.
Okay, I said, at face value, using AI to process data regarding public and private sector contributions to sustainable development feels counterintuitive because of my own knowledge on, just the negative impact that usage of AI can have on the environment. So I'm curious, is the magnitude and purpose of this work purpose of this work proportional to the output that this AI and computers is creating, and how else is that being remedied?
Okay, so I think maybe you're speaking to the importance of responsible AI, which is what the JIRA study is about, that we have to, there's a lot of potential in the use of AI, but we have to ensure it's being used in a responsible way. And I don't know about proportional, but what I would say, there's a lot of opportunities, because one of the last project that we're currently undertaking is looking at the opportunities to use generative AI to monitor social activities. So what are people talking about in our space around social issues? So just as data mining used to be able to do some of that, there are opportunities for the use of AI to do some of this. So there are opportunities, but I agree we have to consider the responsible use of AI.
Okay, thank you so much.
Good afternoon, everyone. Donna Maynard-Cates, Department of Chemistry, UWI. And my question is for Professor Mona Weber. In the experiments that you did, burning the sargassum with the pig waste, did you monitor for volatile arsenic? Because that burning process could cause volatilization, and that is something that we would have to consider in terms of the safety of its use in that application.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for that question. The process of producing burnable gas involved a sealed chamber with the pig slurry was really like an inoculant, and the sargassum was a feedstock. And so together the methane, biomethane was produced, and that is what is burnt. I think most of the arsenic remains in the mass, but we did not test for volatile arsenic. And the assumption is that most of the arsenic would have remained in the slurry, in the mass, but that's an assumption that needs to be tested. And that's beyond the biological sciences. We're looking for partners. One over there. Thank you.
Hello, Natalie Johnson from Environmental Solutions, and my question is for Professor Graham. I have found that some of the government agencies we've dealt with are also recognizing the monetary value of data, and they see it as a potential revenue stream to be able to sell and monetize the data their agencies or departments are collecting. So I see a completing imperative for opening data, sharing data to generate wealth down the road versus the immediate needs of SIDS that are strapped for cash looking for alternative ways to raise money, and data is one of them. And it costs them to produce this data. So while you're doing your research, did you come across any of these attitudes, or did anyone bring this up, and are there any ways to compensate government agencies that would then have to all of a sudden make this data, which is a potential revenue stream, open sourced?
Yes, so I mean, there are issues, as you pointed out, around opening up data, and the same for the private sector. Will they be willing to open up the data or share their data? I think in terms of the government entities, though, I think I think it comes back to Prof's question. I think if we actually spend some effort in valuing the opportunities of sharing and then see what impact it can have on our society, I think that will outweigh the potential revenue earned from selling it, to be honest, for the government sectors. And so I think we have to spend some more effort and research into quantifying the value of open data and sharing data. Because, as I said, the impact can be much greater than just doing it as a business.
Yes, good afternoon, everyone. I just want to add my commendations to the professors for the excellent presentations today. I'm just interested in the publication output of the students with whom you have worked as PVC Graduate Studies and Research. I'm interested in the students, and have we been able to see a lot of publication output, and have they been graduating using publications? So rather, for those who don't know, you can graduate either having one thesis or a series of articles. So I just want to know about that. As I listen to the discussion about AI, I just wondered, we do have an AI policy and statement here at the university, so I'm just doing a PR moment. And I wanted to ask the professor about the misinformation and disinformation, and what is our role as a university in estimating the impact of disinformation and misinformation on sustainable development, and what advice you can give us as we try to grapple with this AI revolution. But commendations, and thank you very much, GraceKennedy Foundation. Thank you.
Yes, thank you for that, BBC. The students I mentioned are in progress. Those are actively working on writing the thesis. The manuscript style thesis is very appealing to both student and supervisor because, of course, the publication output is enhanced. And also, you get tremendous feedback on the thesis as you progress. And so more of our students, it's not popular yet, but more of our students are working with that format, especially the PhD students. And yes, they are publishing. Many of what I showed you had students as co-authors on the work. Thank you.
I think, Prof, you had asked about AI you had spoken about, and its impact. I think you had asked about that. And as I said, the research program related to JIRA, responsible use of AI, does look at one of the sectors is the academic sector and its impact on teaching and learning. So I can't remember exactly what you were asking, but I think it's important to note that while there's a lot of talk about the negatives and the impact that AI is going to have on us, and generative AI in our educational space even. We have to mitigate against them, but we have to also recognize there are a lot of opportunities. And so it's that balance we have to find with managing through responsible use of AI and monitoring while looking for those opportunities.
Thank you. Good evening, and thanks very much for these two excellent presentations from outstanding professors. I'm really always excited to hear about applied research. You know, I think we have a tremendous value, you give a tremendous value to our society. I have two questions. I'm Ruth Potopsing from Environmental Solutions Limited. Thank you. I'm a graduate of UWI. Right. Geography department. My former lecturer is now my employee. Professor Weber, how near are we to commercializing some of the research that you have done? And my second question is to Professor Rao-Graham. The government of Jamaica has a number of frameworks that they are using for analyzing and assessing our achievements in sustainable development. I was wondering how close you work with various frameworks that have been developed by various consultants in the area of climate change and sustainable development, and how it dovetails with the work that you're doing here at UWI. Thank you.
I don't know why I'm going first. I guess I'm the older chair, right? Commercialization of our research. I will say the university has a thrust in that, but individual departments have not gone very far in that regard. The Conch project has tremendous potential because of Conch being a fished, one of our very high-priced fishable resources, and it is threatened. And so once we work those protocols out, there is potential with our partners to perhaps take the technology a step further. And so we are always bearing that in mind, but we want to make sure we get the science right first. Thank you.
Yes, so I think you're speaking to the importance of the alignment of kind of reporting, which I think is essential. I think you had spoken about that also. What we found when we had done the case study with private sector in terms of one of the opportunities for partnerships was that many private sector companies are doing activities or actions not stating from the outset that they're trying to achieve SDG, whatever. But we recognize they were doing a lot of data actions that were relevant to that measurement, and they said to us, we don't see how what we're doing feeds into the SDG monitoring and reporting, and we're not recognized for what input we provide. So I think those opportunities to explore, I think you had mentioned there are some around environment. I think that's an avenue that we need to pursue. I know with the ESGs, it's very metric driven. So I think it requires organizations now to think more about measuring, and therefore that will be more aligned with the SDG. So I see that as an actual opportunity for research and collaboration to ensure that kind of alignment of reporting so that we can progress our SDGs, because it's difficult for the government institutions on their own to do that.
To add to ensure that we are producing reports that are accurate, that are timely, that are auditable. One of the issues that you're having globally with the entire ESG framework and reporting is the fact that because it is metric driven, but it's not heavily regulated. And so there is a great deal of subjectivity in terms of what people are producing, and that would be even higher for us in this region because there's even less guidance and less rigor around it. So to the extent that we can partner, and also I think to a great extent demystify this issue, because I think that is a big challenge for individuals and for the private sector who are interested in pursuing this work. But find it daunting. So I would support that. Do we have any more questions, colleagues? Okay. So now it's time for me to say thank you so very much to our professorial chairs, to Professor Rao-Graham and Professor Weber. Your presentations were absolutely phenomenal in terms of the quality of the output, but also bringing your own personalities to bear on the presentations, even though there was some trepidation. We certainly learned a lot and benefited. And we really have to thank you for the body of work that you've both done, which is so critical to Jamaica and to our development and to, in fact, the entire region. And you have our commitment that we will continue to partner with you. You know, partnership has been such a common theme this evening as we've talked about the partnership with the University of the West Indies and all the work that Grace Kennedy and the foundation continue to do to really support the development of Jamaica and all of the communities that we serve, and we remain committed to doing that. So thank you so much to everybody who came, because if you all didn't come and you didn't join online, this wouldn't be at all possible. We have to say thank you to the Grace Kennedy Foundation team again, to Caroline Mafood in her absence, to Marjorie, to Crystal Gale, to Elizabeth, to Jade Ashley, to Mr. Levine. Where did he go? To Mr. Levine. Okay. Thank you so much. You know, this team is so amazingly hardworking, and they produce so much with so little, and we are extremely proud of them right across the Grace Kennedy family. And we have to thank our technical team, because everything went so swimmingly well. So Visual Tech, Mark White and team, thank you so much for your support as always. And I think now it's time to say farewell until sometime next year. We do have refreshments outside, so don't run away. But as I love to say, colleagues and friends, all good things must come to an end, except when I told that to my 5-year-old on the weekend when I was trying to extract her from a play date, and she said, except for Jesus' love. So you know when you think Sunday school is a good idea and then they turn it around on you. So colleagues, all good things must come to an end, but please join us outside. Thank you so much. Sharing,